Katie from 517 Capital City Podcast and
Kat Gandolfo.
And today we have Dr. Renee Branch Canady, CEO of MPHI and author of Room at the Table. And today we're talking about all things Dr. Renee Branch Canady in your book and all the wonderful things that you're doing. So can you give us just a highlight of who you are? Just give us the rundown of who you are, what you're doing, and a little bit about your book.
Sure. I am a relationship passionate driven person / leader. My entire 30 plus year career has been in public health, which has been about leveraging relationships to keep people healthy, to keep our community healthy. And so that's who I am, and I'm honored to serve as the CEO at MPHI. We're a nationally engaged public health institute that is located or headquartered in Michigan. We were born in Michigan, but our work has really expanded.
Okay, fantastic. And are you located here in Lansing? What's your connection to the Lansing community? Yes. Or the 517 community, I should say.
Yes.
Let's broaden that up.
Well, I am originally from North Carolina, but my sons remind me that I've lived in Michigan longer than North Carolina. So I have to
So we can claim you now.
I have to. I am a Michigander. I moved up here after college, and it's just been a wonderful community for me as well as a wonderful state.
Wonderful.
Tell us a little bit more about your role as the CEO, sorry about that, at MPI, right? It's MPI?
MPH,
sorry.
Mm-hmm. You know, when I first got this job, I was a little bit panicked about this title, CEO. I'm like, oh, they're going to think I know everything. I'm supposed to know everything. I don't know what I'm doing. But really, it is sort of like, I call it the head cheerleader. And I was a head cheerleader in high school. But it is the one that gives my team everything they need to succeed, cheers them on, offers support, offers condolences, offers encouragement, and also casts a vision. Like while they're in there doing the work, I'm out surveying the land and saying, hey, this is going on. Boy, there's this problem. There's this challenge. Let's position our skills and our abilities to help in that area. So it's been a wonderful role.
I love that term cheerleader because I think that is something that, especially if you're out on the LinkedIn community, there's a lot of posts going on about the difference between a boss and a leader and that sort of thing. And I love how you connect people and relationships and more of like that mentorship connection with your title as CEO. It's not something super big and scary and unrelatable and unapproachable. You're looking at it from a completely different perspective of, I have a whole team that I'm trying to carry with me and do amazing, great things. I love how you connect that two together. I think that's so important for businesses that are looking for like the longevity and the future of a business. You have to bring up good people, good, smarter people than yourself to be able to carry out the vision for what you have for the organization.
Exactly.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. Rather than sort of a boss culture.
Exactly.
Where
dictatorship.
Yes. And people are threatened by staff that are more talented or more energetic, and they should be emboldened by that.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. It is very interesting to me how the world feels like it's starting to shift to understand the importance of a leader, or as you call it, leadering. Mm-hmm. You want to talk a little bit about leadering and explain that to our viewers?
Sure. I was saying in the book that I was toying around with it. I just love words. And so I'm like teacher, preacher, leader. And but it seemed to me that people sort of sit on the laurels of that title, leader. I'm a leader. Well, what do you do? Well, I lead. Well, what does that mean? And so I wanted to try to infuse some energy around that role, right? So you're a leader, which is who you are as you do what you do. And if we remember our elementary school English, ing is a gerund, meaning it's doing. So you're always doing as a leader. You don't get to check the box. You don't get to sit back and do or say nothing. That is your job all the time, continually influencing and supporting others to be their best.
It's such an amazing way to look at it. Can you imagine how much better of a work culture it is to work for Dr. Renee?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am hopeful that what you're instilling in your own organization, what you do on a day-to-day basis, is going to bleed in and plant those seeds to just continue to grow for the next generation. So,
yeah. I often say to my team and my mentees, that leadership is not about the position, it's about the positioning.
Again, that ing.
We have all been positioned in an organization. You have a different vantage point because of where you're positioned. And sometimes you're going to be the one who brings the success as opposed to someone over here. And so we try to be very non hierarchical. We're a somewhat flat organization. There aren't a bunch of steps. And sometimes that's challenging because it's like, well, where's my next promotion? But we continue to look at that individual, like, well, what would be progression for you? Is it more? Is it deeper? Supporting everybody differently than that sort of hierarchy.
Right. Wow. Okay, so what has inspired you? What has inspired you to take on this challenge for your book?
Well, it's multiple things, but the two biggest were I'm a former, 16-year faculty member at Michigan State full time. And then I continued to teach. This is my first semester going to adjunct status. I really miss my students. I didn't expect that. But it's the students and mentees, early career professionals that would just say, oh, Renee, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. And so my board of directors do for me what I try to do for my team. And they said, we want to make an investment in you. How can we influence you to be more inspired and excited? And do you want to go to a training, the Harvard Leadership Academy? And I said, hey, I was approached about writing a book. Would you support me to write the book? And they were, of course, thrilled to do it. And so it was those relationships. But it also was current events.
Okay.
We are running from this dialogue about race and class and gender and ability and sexual orientation. We panic in the face of difference. And difference is really
the most beautiful part of the world.
Martin Luther King talks about us being a part of a tapestry. And that is absolutely who we are. And so part of what I hope people will do, other than getting revelation about what it means to be a leader, is what it means to be a leader across difference. How is equity, particularly in this time when people are either saying equity and really not meaning it, or they're not saying it. Well, we can't say diversity and we can't say DEI. And that's your clue for when we really need to be saying it. It's about relationship.
That's so huge. and it segues really nicely into the fact that, so Katie and I were sitting at a Chateau Coffee.
Yep, Chateau Coffee.
And we had your book out. We had it all displayed and we were photographing it and we were talking, and this woman next to us, she steps in, she goes, my book club is reading that book. And we said, oh, well, we're going to have Dr. Renee Canady on our podcast. Do you have any questions you would like us to ask her? And oh my goodness, she was so excited.
It was one of those, like, this is so cool moments, right? Like, because we always talk about like how small of a community, how our big little city of Lansing and that sort of thing. And this was just, she was so excited. You could just hear the passion in everything that she was talking about.
Huge fan of yours.
Yeah, huge fan. We'll be talking about some of her questions here.
Yeah, she asked specifically if we could ask you how your book is being received here locally and how it's being received on a national level.
Yeah. When in the first 3 months, the pre-order time of the book, it was ordered, I think there were like 3,500 orders across 8 states.
Wow.
I like to joke and say those were all states where people who love me live. No.
So what, North Carolina?
I mean, I'm hearing that you're very lovable. I'm very lovable.
But no, some random states. But so it really has continued to have a very consistent appeal to folk. And I think part of the title of the book came from the publishers because I kept using this phrase about we have to keep people whole and we have to keep people at the table. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to feel like they're being called a racist. Nobody wants to be called a homophobic. Nobody wants to be maligned. And so how do we have tough conversations that say, okay, I hear you saying that you don't see yourself as a racist, but do you see how this interaction damaged the relationship because of race? And so how do you do it in a way that honors relationship, keeps people whole, not trying to tear you apart, and keeps you at the table? Because hurt people and privileged people leave the table. I don't have to talk about this, and they leave. And then none of us grow. And so that's where I've been.
There's a deep
so
level
smart.
of like respect for one another, right? And our different perspectives. And one of the things that I think is like continuing to grow and mature in my own career and just as an adult is that it's not really about how old we are either, right? It's about our experiences that we've all lived through and how that molds us to help form our perspective and our just how we interact with one another. And sometimes I feel like too that people who are younger than us, especially when we're looking at it from like a CEO perspective, mm-hmm. right? If we have a boardroom or a leadership table and we have somebody young at the table, then how often we get discredited because of our age. And there are some people wise beyond their years that are half of my age. And we have to be able to respect one another, respect our opinions, our perspectives, and experiences that have got us to where we are today, right? And I think that's just such a huge thing too when we talk about making sure that people aren't discredited or pushed out of a seat at a table too. I hear you, I respect you, and to respect that we have differences.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the big thing that I see just on personal is like, there's certain topics that I don't want to talk about because I know that I'm going to be smothered with people who have a difference in opinion, but that shuts me up because I'm afraid to speak out because I'm going to have stones and tomatoes thrown at me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that hurts. And so then I lose my voice because I know that some of my opinions may be more conservative than somebody else, but that shuts me up. That makes somebody else that's maybe a little more on the bully inside louder. Yeah. And in some sense, it's like, well, what can I change as an individual? And I think that this book is going to help break down those barriers of, well, I'm just one person, right?
Yeah, well, as a sociologist, we study groups, but we can never forget that groups are comprised of individuals.
Oh.
And you know, it's interesting because we do in society have that phrase, oh, you're wise beyond your years. Mm-hmm. But we also don't recognize that a lot of older people never grew up.
Yes. Yep.
Growing old happens. Growing up is optional sometimes. And so there's the flip side of that coin. But I will say, Katie, that it takes real courage. And even at my age and stage, there's always someone who's older, more experienced, smarter, sold more books, wrote more books. There's always something for you to feel like, maybe my voice doesn't matter. But when I'm going to say that tough thing across maybe philosophies, conservative versus liberal, you know, I take a risk and I let people know I'm taking a risk. I'm going to trust you in this conversation, or I'm going to take a risk because I think it's important and your relationship means a lot to me.
Right.
And then I just lay it out there. And so they can either given the context that I put it out there, they can either bash it or they can appreciate that I took a chance.
Right.
Well, and if anything comes up as a non-confrontational, as soon as you get, like, you can even hear it in someone's voice. If you can avoid having that like confrontational, then people can receive your message better.
Mhm.
And that, when I was reading your book, that was just really a aha moment for me.
Yeah.
Like, there are a few things that I'm very easygoing and I can usually have a conversation about anything.
Mhm.
There are a few things that I'm like dead stop, absolutely know where I am on, and race is one of them. Like, if you are at all hateful or racist, I'm done. Like, one of the things I love about my career is if someone wants to discriminate, I am obligated to fight them or to fire them. Mm-hmm. So if I have a seller who says, I don't want to sell my house to someone who's Black, great, find someone else. I'm done. Mm-hmm. Because that's what our career, but that doesn't give me the opportunity to educate them or make them a better person. Mm-hmm. So that was okay, there's a way that I could find a better way to than being so, blunt about it, like dead stop. I don't want to work with you. I don't want to be around you, and find a way that there is a person in there, and people are experiences, and maybe there's an experience that has led them to feel this way, and maybe I can help change that about them. So this was a good wake up call for me.
Completely overnight, right?
Yeah.
Like, to change someone's perspective isn't going to necessarily happen. I mean, it could, but it may not happen overnight. But when, again, looking back at like groups, like, we're all here to plant seeds, right? Mm-hmm. So even if you plant the seed of like, I understand where you're coming from, but this is why. You plant your seed, and you may not work with them again, right? But it's like you're planting the seed of like, there's better ways to go about this.
Well, there's a you went right to where I was going to go. There's a proverb, or as a faith-based person, there's a verse that says, some plant, some water, and God gives the increase. So we all have a role. And what I try to help people understand is the reason why we avoid these dialogues, because I might not have the right thing to say. I don't know what to say. This
You're afraid to say
dialogue happens through questions. And so my psychology friends and our work on ACEs at MPHI, which is Adverse Childhood Events, they talk about not what's wrong with you, but what happened. So in this case, I don't want a Black person to buy my house. Wow, can we come at this with some compassion? There's an opportunity for us to learn. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what happened to that person? Tell me a little bit about that. What can you help me understand why you don't want to sell to a Black person?
Give me goosebumps. And that leads into the woman's second question, like, perfectly, because she was asking about your productive outrage, and how in today's tumultuous environment can we as a community or as individuals use that productive outrage to be effective.
Yeah, much of my research was on infant mortality and the fact that Black babies die 2 to 3 times more likely than white babies before their first birthday. I do this work to honor my son, Howard, who I talk about. I mentioned in the book, Howard was delivered at 28 weeks due to my own preeclampsia hypertension, and then caught RSV as a young preemie, and so lost his life when he was 6 months old. And so we were talking about, isn't it ridiculous that babies are still dying? And isn't it absurd that Black women die in childbirth? Like, what? Yes. What year is it? And so I was talking with my dear friend, Amy Zagman, and she does maternal child health work as well. And she says it's outrageous. And we were just going back and forth, like, you just want to tear up something. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. What can we do with that outrage? Like, how can we be productive, and use that outrage to drive? And so I kept thinking about this term, productive outrage, and landed at this concept, which is a sense of indignation that drives sustained action. Something's got to fuel us. if I look around, many of the things that have happened in Lansing, and yes, such a wonderful community of innovators and doers. And it's usually because someone got sick and tired of being sick and tired of something. They got productively outraged and said, I think we can do something about this. We were just talking before we got on camera about a business that was dealing with to-go boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And she, I would say, got productively outraged about the waste, the unnecessary waste, and decided she would do something about it. And so that's really what I'm inspiring people. I tell my students, I don't really care what you know. I want to know what you think. My pastor said to me one day, Doc, you're at the point now where people seek you out not because of what you know, but because of what you think. Epiphany. People are not giving permission to introduce their opinions and their feelings about the facts all around them. And that's where we just get stuck on sort of this backsliding into very racist ideologies and think about it. Women couldn't even vote. We're entering into an election season.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother could not vote. It seems absurd, but it's that type of indignation that drives productive change. We're not trying to tear up relationships. I'm trying to leverage relationships. I'm trying to build authentic relationships with folk who don't look like me. Younger people, white people, blonde people, people who don't wear glasses.
Right.
Contacts.
Still not wearing your
I
glasses.
cannot see worth anything.
How do we seek out difference so that we can all build relationships that not only heal Lansing, but heal our land? This country needs Lansing to be a shining beacon of how we do this well.
I think Lansing, one of the things I love about Lansing is it has started to do that. And Lansing does produce incredible people like you that just amaze us at every turn. I love it here.
Even when it's cold in April.
Yes.
Somebody was literally asking me the other day, they're like, what do you think real estate's going to do here in the long term? And I was like, well, I think we're going to get a whole influx of people from climate and everything else. And it's as much as people don't realize it, this is a very accepting community.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where it needs to be yet.
Yes.
But it is far better than a majority of the country. And we are seeing an influx of that, of people coming here because they want to be accepted. Yeah. I mean, a huge influx of people because they can come here and be who they are and not feel threatened.
Yes.
And so I don't see real estate slowing down because of that. Like, it's just, people want to live here.
Right.
Because they want to feel accepted. If we could find a way to broaden that for the rest of the world, that'd be great.
And I do want to appreciate that point, because we're not perfect. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna, but I'm cut from the optimistic cloth.
Yes.
My glass is half full, and I'm going to be pursuing strengths to leverage. Other people's callings may be to pursue the weakness to mediate them. It's going to take all of that. But I have found that people have invited me into dialogue with them. And at MPHI, we do talk about facilitated dialogue as doing, as action, not idle conversation, not chit chat, or people saying, I'm so tired of talking about this. Yes, well, let's have a dialogue that's going to help us drive change. And so, not trying to be Pollyanna at all, but this is our assignment. And this is quite candidly the philosophy that I have brought to leadership at MPHI.
How can the community be more involved with MPHI?
Well, we're on all of the social media platforms. Use us as a resource. We have a wonderfully rich website that has a number of resources on it. We're always doing posts. We've got like the little Saturday Academy where we try to put up little facts on LinkedIn. So seek us out. Quite candidly, we're involved now in some really pivotal work around violence interruption. And it was because the health department knew about some things we were doing, knew they were didn't have all the capacity, and just reached out and said, "Hey, do you think you can help us with this?" And if you haven't heard about Advanced Peace, you'll have to invite my colleague, Dr. Paul Elam, to come in and his team to talk about that. We're making massive differences in community with community who are influencing change around violence and gun use in our community.
We just clone you and like give every state needs one. Like then North Carolina can have one too, and making the world better everywhere.
Making the world a better place. Nationally engaged and located in Michigan.
For your readers or someone who is now inspired to pick up the book, what is a call to action for them, right? Like, what do you want them to walk away with? What is something that you really hope for your readers to gain from reading this book?
I believe, got to a point in our society where we thought, oh, thanks to those civil rights people, we checked the box. We don't have to do that.
Thanks to those civil rights people.
Thank y'all. But they actually began the work. I mean, the signs are down. There's not the white only, colors, all of that. Signs are down. We changed laws, but we didn't necessarily change hearts. And because I think my generation got lazy. We did some backsliding, and now your generation,
we're feeling
it. It's feeling it.
Yeah.
It's feeling it. And so I want people to know the work is not done. I grew up in a military family. My dad was a career Air Force person. My brother went to West Point, served in Desert Storm. I love this country. But this country is not the best that we can be. And so it's good enough for some people. Mm-hmm. Some people don't have any problems, but the vast majority have problems that all of us have to just, we talk a lot about personal responsibility. We also then need to have social responsibility. If you're telling a mom, well, you should walk more, you're obese, you should get out and walk more. Well, on my street, there's no sidewalks, there's lots of traffic, it's not safe for me to walk. That's where social responsibility comes in. That's what the founders of public health defined public health as, what we as a society do together to assure our health.
What would you say? You mentioned that you feel that your generation got lazy. What do you say to the people who are just tired?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I don't know if I have the energy to continue this fight. What do you say to the people who are just weary and tired of the struggle and the battle of like, oh, this is so hard. Like everything seems to be so hard. What do you say to those people?
I say it is hard and it is tiring. But one of my, again, go-to verses that I challenge myself is a book in the book of Galatians says, "Be not weary in well-doing, for in due season you'll reap if you faint not." So the Renee Canady translation is, "Don't get tired of doing the right thing, because if we hang in there, we will all benefit." And so this is a team sport. When I started developing this work at the Ingham County Health Department with my dear friend Dope Bloss, there were days when Dope would walk into my office and say, "I'm done." And I would say, "You're not leaving me hanging out here." Or I would go into his office and say, "Ah," and he'd say, "I got it. Tag out. I'll cover that." So it is all of us working together, understanding that today Renee might be tired.
Right.
And you're going to cover me and help me so that I can stay in it with you and that we win together.
That reminds me a lot of I'm gonna pause for a second. Make sure that this
is recording.
It like the screen just went black. So.
The sound on that is awful. So hopefully,
Well, yeah, that's
The playback.
that's the
It is 11:18. How are you doing on time, Renee?
Great question.
because we could wrap it and
Yeah.
come back and just have the question be,
Just make sure what I had.
how can people get your book?
Okay. All right. So it's still recorded. So that's good. It's just the recording stopped. So I've been watching it because
I could
Yeah.
I could see your stomach dropping like as you were starting to ask that question. I could see like
Panic.
what's happening. Something's happening.
Yeah. Okay. So we're at 32 minutes. Do you want to do a couple of reels then? Let's.
We should,
I'm okay.
And then we gotta
Yeah,
go
I
back.
got till
We gotta
1:30.
close it out.
Oh, perfect.
We
Okay.
need to wrap up.
Let's
And
close
then
it out.
I think that there were enough good moments in there. Like if you want to
can
do
just
the reels,
clip
we
it.
can if she's got time. Otherwise, we could just clip out some of those like really
Yeah, I would love to have Renee.
good, do the reels.
At least a couple of them. I mean, you kind of went into leadering, you went into productive outreach a little bit, but I think the one about what is public health is so important because people don't understand it. And then the other one, when you were talking about leadering, I've heard you mention a couple of times, like, who is a leader? Or what would you say to people who feel like they're not a leader?
Mhm.
And I
Really
love
like
when
that.
you speak to that. 'Cause
Mhm.
I know that that's, imposter syndrome statistically
Yeah.
is rampant for, women, although it's becoming more prominent for men in Gen Z and younger millennials. So I think that's one that's really a good one to speak about.
Why don't we, real quick? Why don't you just
do a
do a wrap up?
Okay.
Like this was a really beautiful conversation. How can people, and then we'll tag that at the end of when you edit, and then we'll do reels.
Okay.
Are we already recording?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Thank you so much. I've absolutely loved this conversation. I feel like I could talk with you forever.
Yeah, like it would
So-
never end, and I'd be happy.
Yeah, so thank you so much for coming. You've already mentioned a little bit about how people can connect with MPHI. Where can they find your book and connect with you?
Well, they can find the book anywhere. I encourage you to think about local bookstores, but anybody can order it, Target or Barnes and Nobles or Walgreens, and of course there's Amazon. But reach out and do one thing. Maybe your one thing is just reading the introduction and getting an idea. Maybe your one thing is talking to someone and saying, I had this interesting podcast that I listened to. Maybe it's talking to a relative and just saying, maybe one day I'd love for us to talk about this stuff. Snippets. It doesn't have to be everything all at once. We're moving forward together.
Well, thank you so much for coming. And we look forward to having more conversations, more wonderful, productive conversations. And we hope all of you who are listening here today pick up the book, join in on the conversation, add it to your book club.
Come join the table.
Come join
There's
the
room.
table.
Get a seat at the
There's
table.
table. Yes. So even if you have read the book and you have some things that you want to share with us, drop us a direct message, send us an email, and maybe we can even have you on 517 Capital City Podcast. So thank you all for listening. Tune into more wonderful segments here to come in the near future.
Catch.